Today, we dive into the dark side of biblical history as we explore the three most evil queens of the Bible. From manipulating kings to instigating idol worship, these powerful women left a mark of treachery and deception. We'll uncover their stories, motivations, and the profound impact they had on their kingdoms. So, grab your scrolls and prepare for a journey through intrigue, betrayal, and darkness in the royal courts of the ancient world. Let's begin. Jezebel. Jezebel was a Phoenician princess who became the queen of Israel through marriage to King Ahab, who ruled the northern kingdom of Israel during the 9th century BCE. Her father, Ethbaal, was the king of Sidon in modern-day Lebanon and a priest of the god Baal, one of the primary deities of the Phoenician religion. This marriage was likely arranged to secure political alliances between Israel and Phoenicia, neighboring nations who shared a complex relationship. Jezebel's introduction to Israel marked a significant turning point, as she was not only a foreigner but also a strong-willed promoter of her own religious beliefs, which directly conflicted with the Israelite worship of Yahweh. Her arrival set off a series of conflicts, both religious and political, that would define her reign. The introduction of Baal worship. One of Jezebel's most infamous acts was her fervent promotion of Baal worship in Israel. Baal was the Canaanite god of fertility, storms, and rain, a powerful deity in agricultural societies. Jezebel sought to replace the worship of Yahweh with Baal worship, building temples and altars dedicated to Baal and encouraging the Israelites to worship him as their primary god. This was a direct challenge to the worship of Yahweh, the God of Israel, and led to immense friction between Jezebel and Israel's prophets. Jezebel's actions weren't simply religious choices. They represented a significant cultural and ideological clash. In the ancient world, deities often embodied the values, culture, and identity of a nation. By promoting Baal worship, Jezebel was not only disregarding the Israelites' religious customs, but actively seeking to replace them with foreign beliefs. This created a divide between the king and queen and the Israelite people. Jezebel versus the prophets of Yahweh. The conflict between Jezebel and the prophets of Yahweh reached a boiling point in her persecution of Yahweh's prophets. Jezebel used her position to hunt down and kill many of the prophets who stood against Baal worship. She intended to eradicate the influence of Yahweh worship, aiming to consolidate religious power in Israel under Baal. One of the most significant clashes during this period was between Jezebel and the prophet Elijah, who became her primary adversary. Elijah, a zealous prophet of Yahweh, confronted the growing idolatry and corruption fostered by Jezebel and Ahab. The famous contest on Mount Carmel between Elijah and the prophets of Baal served as a powerful showdown. During this confrontation, Elijah challenged the prophets of Baal to call upon their God to ignite an offering. When they failed, Elijah called upon Yahweh, who sent down fire to consume the offering, demonstrating his supremacy. This event was a turning point, affirming Yahweh's power and discrediting Baal worship in the eyes of the people. In response, Jezebel vowed to kill Elijah, forcing him to flee for his life. The story of Naboth's vineyard. Another episode that illustrates Jezebel's ruthlessness is the story of Naboth's vineyard. Ahab desired a vineyard owned by a man named Naboth, which was situated near his palace in Jezreel. When Naboth refused to sell the vineyard, citing that it was his ancestral inheritance, Ahab was disheartened. Jezebel, however, took matters into her own hands. She orchestrated a scheme to have Naboth falsely accused of blasphemy and treason. Through her manipulation, Naboth was executed, and Ahab was able to seize the vineyard. This incident is significant for a few reasons. First, it highlights Jezebel's disregard for both Israelite law and the moral principles underlying it. Naboth's attachment to his vineyard wasn't simply financial. It represented his family's heritage, as ancestral land was deeply significant to the Israelites. Jezebel's actions reveal her willingness to exploit power and bend the law to achieve her goals, regardless of the harm it caused to others. Additionally, the story of Naboth's vineyard sets the stage for the judgment pronounced on Jezebel. After Naboth's unjust death, Elijah appeared to Ahab and prophesied a grim fate for both him and Jezebel. Elijah's prophecy foreshadowed that Jezebel would meet a violent death and that her body would be devoured by dogs, signifying her ultimate disgrace and the divine judgment upon her sins. Jezebel's influence over Ahab and Israel. Jezebel's influence over her husband, Ahab, played a crucial role in the corruption of Israel. The Bible portrays Ahab as a king who was relatively weak-willed and easily swayed, which made him susceptible to Jezebel's influence. Under her sway, Ahab allowed and even encouraged the growth of idolatry, disregarding the covenant between Yahweh and Israel. The Bible describes Ahab as having done more to provoke the Lord, the God of Israel, to anger than all the kings of Israel who were before him, 1 Kings 16 verse 33, largely due to his adoption of Jezebel's beliefs and practices. Jezebel's influence extended beyond Ahab to the entire nation. Her zealous promotion of Baal worship and persecution of Yahweh's prophets had a ripple effect, leading many Israelites to turn away from Yahweh. This wasn't simply an issue of personal belief. It was a crisis that threatened the spiritual foundation of Israel. Jezebel's actions led to a period of religious and moral decay, as the people began to adopt practices and values that were antithetical to their own. The downfall of Jezebel. The prophecy of Elijah came to fruition after Ahab's death. Their son, Jehoram, ascended to the throne but faced growing opposition. Jehu, a military commander, was anointed by the prophet Elisha to overthrow the house of Ahab. In a dramatic series of events, Jehu led a rebellion that culminated in the assassination of Jehoram and the pursuit of Jezebel. Jezebel's final moments are portrayed with a sense of irony and poetic justice. As Jehu approached Jezreel, Jezebel adorned herself with makeup and fine clothes, perhaps in a final attempt to retain her dignity or to face her death on her own terms. However, Jehu ordered her servants to throw her out of a window, and her body was trampled by horses. When they later returned to bury her, they found only her skull, feet, and hands, fulfilling Elijah's prophecy that her body would be consumed by dogs. This grisly end symbolized her ultimate defeat and disgrace, serving as a powerful message about the consequences of her actions. Legacy and symbolism of Jezebel. Jezebel's story has endured as a cautionary tale about the dangers of idolatry, corruption, and the misuse of power. In many interpretations, Jezebel is viewed as a symbol of seduction, manipulation, and moral corruption. Her name has become synonymous with the archetype of the wicked woman, often invoked to denote a figure who challenges social or religious norms, particularly in ways that seem morally dubious. In Christian tradition, Jezebel's legacy is extended into the New Testament in the Book of Revelation. Here, the name Jezebel is used symbolically to describe a woman who leads the church of Thyatira into immorality and idolatry, emphasizing her association with corruption and spiritual degradation. This enduring portrayal underscores the cultural and religious impact Jezebel's story has had over centuries, making her a symbol of rebellion against divine order. Jezebel's complexity and broader implications. While Jezebel is often portrayed in a one-dimensional light as purely evil, examining her story from a broader perspective reveals a complex figure whose actions stemmed from both personal convictions and cultural loyalties. Her zealous promotion of Baal worship, while antagonistic to Israelite religion, was consistent with her own upbringing and her role as a queen dedicated to securing her legacy and influence. From her perspective, Jezebel may have believed that she was acting in the best interests of her family and nation, using her influence to introduce what she viewed as beneficial reforms. Moreover, Jezebel's story raises questions about the power dynamics between men and women, especially in a society dominated by patriarchal norms. Jezebel's ability to influence Ahab and exert control over political and religious matters reveals the potential of women in positions of power. Her portrayal as a wicked woman may also reflect the discomfort of ancient society with strong-willed, influential women who defied traditional roles. Lessons from Jezebel's life. The story of Jezebel offers several important lessons, both within its historical context and for readers today. First, It underscores the dangers of absolute power and the temptation to abuse authority for personal gain. Jezebel's willingness to manipulate and destroy those who stood in her way serves as a warning about the consequences of unchecked ambition and the moral degradation that can follow. Second, Jezebel's story illustrates the perils of cultural and religious compromise. By imposing her beliefs on the Israelites and attempting to erase their religious identity, Jezebel sowed seeds of discord and moral decline. Her story highlights the importance of respecting cultural and spiritual diversity while recognizing the value of maintaining core values. Lastly, the narrative of Jezebel's downfall serves as a reminder of the concept of divine justice. Her gruesome death symbolizes the ultimate judgment against those who act with impunity, suggesting that while justice may be delayed, it is inevitable. Athaliah. Athaliah was a queen of Judah and one of the few women in the Bible to seize the throne in her own right. She was the daughter of Ahab and Jezebel, the infamous rulers of the northern kingdom of Israel. Athaliah married Jehoram, the king of Judah, and through this marriage, she became the queen consort of Judah, thereby linking the royal families of Israel and Judah. This alliance was a political strategy meant to unify the two kingdoms and solidify power, although it had serious consequences for Judah's spiritual state. Athaliah's connection to her parents, Ahab and Jezebel, heavily influenced her reign. Like her mother Jezebel, Athaliah was deeply committed to Baal worship, which was in direct opposition to the worship of Yahweh, the God of Israel. Her devotion to Baal and her willingness to eliminate rivals made her one of the most ruthless and notorious queens in biblical history. The rise of Athaliah. After the death of her husband, King Jehoram, Athaliah's son, Ahaziah, took the throne. However, his reign was short-lived. Ahaziah was killed by Jehu, the military commander of Israel who had been anointed by the prophet Elisha to bring judgment upon the house of Ahab and eliminate Baal worship in Israel. Jehu's rebellion led to the deaths of many members of the royal family, including Athaliah's son Ahaziah. Upon learning of her son's death, Athaliah seized power in a brutal manner. She saw an opportunity to claim the throne of Judah for herself, something unheard of for a woman in her time. In order to secure her position, Athaliah took extreme measures, ordering the massacre of all the royal family's descendants, including her own grandchildren. This ensured there would be no heirs to challenge her rule, marking her as one of the most ruthless figures in the Bible. Athaliah's reign and influence. Athaliah ruled Judah for 6 years. During her reign, she continued her parents' legacy by actively promoting Baal worship in Judah. This was a significant and troubling departure from the worship of Yahweh, as Judah had traditionally remained more faithful to Yahweh compared to the northern kingdom of Israel. Athaliah established temples and altars to Baal, introducing idol worship and corrupting the religious practices of Judah. This led the people of Judah into a state of spiritual apostasy, undermining the religious foundation of the nation. Athaliah's reign represented a time of darkness for Judah. Her encouragement of Baal worship and her disregard for the traditions of Yahweh alienated many within the kingdom. The high priests and devout followers of Yahweh were forced into hiding, and the true worship of Yahweh was suppressed. Athaliah's rule effectively disconnected Judah from its religious identity, creating a spiritual crisis in the kingdom. The survival of Joash. Athaliah's attempt to eliminate the entire royal family was nearly successful, but one infant, Joash, was saved. Joash was the son of Ahaziah, Athaliah's own grandson, and a rightful heir to the throne of Judah. In a bold act of defiance, Jehosheba, the sister of Ahaziah and wife of the high priest Jehoiada, managed to rescue Joash from the massacre and hid him in the temple of Yahweh. Jehoiada and Jehosheba protected and raised Joash in secret, knowing that he was the only hope for the continuation of David's royal line in Judah. The survival of Joash is significant because it preserved the Davidic line, which was crucial to the covenantal promise God made to David that his descendants would rule forever. The preservation of Joash symbolized hope for the people of Judah, as it meant that God's covenant with David was still intact, even in the face of Athaliah's brutal attempt to destroy the royal family. The revolt against Athaliah. After 6 years of Athaliah's reign, the high priest Jehoiada initiated a plan to restore the rightful king to the throne. Jehoiada, a devoted follower of Yahweh, organized a revolt against Athaliah. He gathered the Levites and the military commanders, informing them of Joshua's existence and rightful claim to the throne. This conspiracy was carefully planned to ensure the safety of the young king and to avoid alerting Athaliah's loyalists. In a dramatic turn of events, Jehoiada anointed Joash as king in a public ceremony in the temple of Yahweh, surrounded by guards and supporters. The people rejoiced, shouting, "Long live the king!" Athaliah, hearing the commotion, rushed to the temple to see what was happening. Upon seeing Joash crowned king, she realized her reign was over and cried out, "Treason! Treason!" However, her cries fell on deaf ears. Jehoiada ordered that Athaliah be taken outside the temple grounds and executed to prevent bloodshed within the sacred space. Athaliah was put to death, marking the end of her tyrannical rule and the restoration of the Davidic line to the throne of Judah. The people of Judah then tore down the altars to Baal and returned to the worship of Yahweh, symbolizing a national and spiritual restoration after years of apostasy. The impact of Athaliah's reign. Athaliah's rule had far-reaching consequences for Judah. Her promotion of Baal worship and her attempt to extinguish the Davidic line posed a significant threat to the nation's religious identity and stability. Her actions underscored the dangers of idolatry and the moral degradation that can arise when leaders abandon their responsibilities to uphold justice and the spiritual welfare of their people. From a theological perspective, Athaliah's story illustrates the concept of divine justice and the resilience of God's covenantal promises. Despite Athaliah's efforts to destroy the Davidic line, God's promise to David prevailed, as Joash was preserved and eventually restored to the throne. This preservation of the Davidic line is significant in biblical history, as it ultimately leads to the lineage from which Jesus, the Messiah, would come. Athaliah's story, therefore, emphasizes the faithfulness of God in upholding his promises, even in the face of seemingly insurmountable opposition. Lessons from Athaliah's life. Athaliah's story offers several important lessons about leadership, faith, and the dangers of unchecked ambition. Here are some key takeaways. The perils of idolatry. Athaliah's reign demonstrated the spiritual and moral corruption that can result from abandoning true worship. Her promotion of Baal worship led to the degradation of Judah's religious identity and opened the door to practices that were destructive to the nation's moral fabric. Her story serves as a cautionary tale about the consequences of idolatry and the importance of upholding spiritual principles. The dangers of power and ambition. Athaliah's ruthless ambition to maintain power at all costs led her to commit unspeakable acts, including the massacre of her own family members. Her willingness to eliminate any potential threats underscores the corrupting influence of unchecked ambition. Her story warns of the moral pitfalls that come with a desire for power that supersedes loyalty to one's family, community, and faith. The faithfulness of God's promises. Despite Athaliah's best efforts to eliminate the Davidic line, God's promise to David remained unbroken. Joash's survival and eventual restoration to the throne demonstrate God's sovereignty and faithfulness in keeping his covenant. This aspect of the story encourages readers to trust in God's promises, even in difficult or dark times when fulfillment may seem unlikely. The importance of courageous leadership. The high priest Jehoiada played a critical role in opposing Athaliah's rule and restoring the worship of Yahweh. His courage and wisdom in orchestrating the rebellion against Athaliah highlight the importance of righteous leadership. Jehoiada's actions show how godly leaders can restore justice and spiritual integrity to a community, even when facing powerful opposition. Divine justice prevails. Athaliah's death represents a moment of divine justice, as her reign of terror was brought to an end and she faced the consequences of her actions. Her downfall serves as a reminder that, although justice may sometimes be delayed, it is ultimately inevitable. Her story echoes the biblical theme that the wicked will not go unpunished, Proverbs 11 verse 21, reinforcing the concept that those who commit evil will eventually face the repercussions of their deeds. Herodias. Herodias was a queen during the 1st century AD, part of the ruling Herodian dynasty, which governed parts of Judea and Galilee under Roman influence. The Herodian family was known for its turbulent relationships and political ambitions, often leading to complex, and sometimes incestuous, family alliances. Herodias herself was a granddaughter of Herod the Great, who was infamous for his ruthless rule and his orders to massacre male infants in Bethlehem in an attempt to kill the newborn Jesus. Matthew 2 verse 16. Herodias was initially married to her half-uncle Herod Philip, but she later left him to marry another half-uncle, Herod Antipas, the Tetrarch of Galilee and Perea. This marriage was considered scandalous and unlawful according to Jewish law, as it was both incestuous and adulterous, since Herod Antipas was still married to his first wife, the daughter of the Nabatean king, Aretas IV. This decision to marry Herod Antipas would become the source of significant religious and moral conflict, particularly with John the Baptist. Herodias and John the Baptist. John the Baptist was a revered prophet and preacher who openly condemned Herodias' marriage to Herod Antipas, seeing it as a violation of Jewish law. John's vocal criticism posed a threat to Herodias' authority and reputation, and his influence among the people amplified her resentment. In the Gospels, John publicly rebuked Herod Antipas, saying, "It is not lawful for you to have her." Mark 6 verse 18. His criticism not only challenged Herodias' personal life, but also questioned the legitimacy of her position as queen. While Herod Antipas was intrigued by John and hesitant to act against him, Herodias' anger toward the prophet grew into a desire for vengeance. According to Mark 6 verse 19, Herodias nursed a grudge against John and wanted to kill him. However, she was unable to act immediately due to her husband's protection of John, as Herod feared both John's popularity and the potential political backlash of executing a man considered holy by the people. Herodias' vendetta reveals a complex interplay of personal pride, power, and insecurity. Her position was already morally dubious in the eyes of many, and John's outspoken condemnation threatened the fragile acceptance she had achieved. Her resentment toward John ultimately became a deep-seated hatred, motivating her to find a way to silence him permanently. The Dance of Salome and the beheading of John the Baptist. The opportunity for Herodias' revenge came during Herod Antipas' birthday celebration, a grand banquet attended by Galilee's high-ranking officials, military commanders, and other dignitaries. At this banquet, Herodias' daughter, traditionally known as Salome, performed a dance that pleased Herod Antipas so much that he impulsively promised to grant her whatever she desired, up to half of his kingdom. Upon hearing this generous offer, Salome consulted her mother, Herodias, on what to request. Seizing this opportunity, Herodias instructed her daughter to ask for the head of John the Baptist on a platter, Mark 6 verses 24 to 25. This gruesome request shocked the guests and disturbed Herod Antipas, who, despite his reluctance, felt compelled to fulfill his promise due to the public nature of his oath. As a result, John the Baptist was executed, and his head was brought to Salome, who then presented it to her mother, Herodias. This episode is significant for several reasons. Herodias' manipulation. Herodias did not directly ask for John's execution, but instead used her daughter as an instrument to achieve her goal. This level of manipulation speaks to her cunning nature and the depth of her vengeful ambition. Herodias was not deterred by the moral implications of her actions. She was willing to exploit her daughter's innocence and the king's vulnerability to exact revenge on John. Moral cowardice and Herod's weakness. Herod's agreement to execute John demonstrates his moral weakness and susceptibility to public pressure. Although he respected John and was hesitant to kill him, Herod allowed his impulsive promise and the expectations of his guests to override his conscience. In doing so, he compromised his principles and surrendered to Herodias' sinister demands. The impact of revenge. The beheading of John the Baptist, an act driven solely by Herodias' desire for revenge, symbolizes the destructive consequences of unchecked hatred. Herodias' need to protect her pride and position ultimately led to the death of an innocent and righteous man, highlighting the moral decay that can stem from unchecked anger and bitterness. Historical and theological context. Herodias' actions reflect broader themes within the Bible, particularly the conflict between moral law and the corrupting influence of power. Her marriage to Herod Antipas and her role in John's death serve as an example of how political ambitions and personal grievances can lead individuals to violate both religious and ethical standards. Herodias' pursuit of revenge against John is viewed not only as a personal vendetta but also as an act of rebellion against divine principles. John was a prophet and a spokesperson for righteousness, representing the voice of God, and Herodias' actions against him symbolized her defiance against moral authority. Furthermore, the story of Herodias serves as a contrast between worldly power and divine justice. Although Herodias succeeded in killing John, her victory was ultimately hollow. According to historical accounts, her ambition would later lead to her own downfall. Herod Antipas, at the urging of Herodias, sought a higher title from the Roman Emperor Caligula. Instead of receiving a promotion, he was banished to Gaul, modern-day France, and Herodias followed him into exile. Her ambitions for political power and revenge, which initially seemed successful, ultimately ended in humiliation and loss. Herodias' legacy. Herodias' story, particularly the beheading of John the Baptist, left a lasting impression in both Christian and secular literature as a warning against the moral dangers of revenge, manipulation, and unchecked ambition. The dance of Salome and the gruesome execution that followed have been depicted in countless works of art, literature, and music, symbolizing the moral decline that can arise from lust for power and resentment. Herodias' name has become synonymous with the archetype of a wicked queen in Christian tradition. Her actions exemplify the destructive nature of harboring resentment and the lengths to which a person might go when motivated by revenge. Her manipulation of her daughter to accomplish her own ends also highlights a profound moral failing, as she prioritized her own desires over the welfare and innocence of her child. In the broader biblical narrative, Herodias' legacy serves as a reminder of the cost of opposing God's messengers and the futility of trying to silence those who speak truth. John the Baptist was revered as a prophet who prepared the way for Jesus, and his martyrdom foreshadowed the persecution and suffering that many of Jesus' followers would face for upholding their faith. Lessons from Athaliah's life. Athaliah's story offers several important lessons about leadership, faith, and the dangers of unchecked ambition. Here are some key takeaways. The perils of idolatry. Athaliah's reign demonstrated the spiritual and moral corruption that can result from abandoning true worship. Her promotion of Baal worship led to the degradation of Judah's religious identity and opened the door to practices that were destructive to the nation's moral fabric. Her story serves as a cautionary tale about the consequences of idolatry and the importance of upholding spiritual principles. The dangers of power and ambition. Athaliah's ruthless ambition to maintain power at all costs led her to commit unspeakable acts, including the massacre of her own family members. Her willingness to eliminate any potential threats underscores the corrupting influence of unchecked ambition. Her story warns of the moral pitfalls that come with a desire for power that supersedes loyalty to one's family, community, and faith. The faithfulness of God's promises. Despite Athaliah's best efforts to eliminate the Davidic line, God's promise to David remained unbroken. Josiah's survival and eventual restoration to the throne demonstrate God's sovereignty and faithfulness in keeping his covenant. This aspect of the story encourages readers to trust in God's promises, even in difficult or dark times when fulfillment may seem unlikely. The importance of courageous leadership. The high priest Jehoiada played a critical role in opposing Athaliah's rule and restoring the worship of Yahweh. His courage and wisdom in orchestrating the rebellion against Athaliah highlight the importance of righteous leadership. Jehoiada's actions show how godly leaders can restore justice and spiritual integrity to a community, even when facing powerful opposition. Divine justice prevails. Athaliah's death represents a moment of divine justice, as her reign of terror was brought to an end and she faced the consequences of her actions. Her downfall serves as a reminder that, although justice may sometimes be delayed, it is ultimately inevitable. Her story echoes the biblical theme that the wicked will not go unpunished, Proverbs 11 verse 21, reinforcing the concept that those who commit evil will eventually face the repercussions of their deeds. Thank you for joining us on this journey through the lives of the Bible's most notorious queens. Their tales remind us of the powerful forces of ambition and vengeance that can shape history. Which queen surprised you the most? Share your thoughts in the comments below. If you enjoyed this video, please give it a thumbs up and subscribe for more deep dives into biblical stories. Hit the notification bell to stay updated on our latest content. Until next time, keep exploring the fascinating world of the Bible